Well, welcome in once again, everybody, to another edition of Pick Your Politics, the show that talks about the relevant issues of today, not only in Nevada, where we are coming to you live from the great Rigel Studios in the heart of Las Vegas, but all over the country. And we bring on folks that are office holders, people that are seeking office, to get their opinions, to get their outlooks on issues, what they would do to fix things and to make things better, not only, again, for the people of Nevada, but all through the country. And I'm Dennis Silvers, along with my fabulous co-host Stephanie Phillips, and we've got a very interesting show for you today. And Stephanie, as you remember, when we closed the show last week, I said, how many people out there actually know that there's somebody else that's running for governor of Nevada?
That's right. Not very many people know there's a libertarian candidate on the ballot.
So we're going to introduce him to you, and it may not be a name that's familiar to you right now, but hopefully by the end of the show, you're going to know what this guy's about a little bit, and you're going to recognize his name, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the little sound machine?
Oh, I don't know.
That claps for me.
Speaking of little sound machines, we're going to bring up Mulligan, our
mascot.
Say hello, Mulligan. Come on, say hello to the camera.
Our mascot and decision dog.
Yeah, and then get back in our
Thank
lap.
you, Rick.
But anyway, we'll do
there
that.
It is.
Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Brandon Davis is his name. He is the CEO of a Las Vegas-based marketing and advertising firm, and is a partial owner in multiple other small businesses. He is the Elections Committee Director for the Libertarian Party of Nevada. Brandon is the Libertarian candidate for the office of Governor of the state of Nevada. He wants to lead the people in Nevada, as he puts it, on a new path. He's trying to connect with Nevadans who are done, fed up, wash their hands with the two major parties who are currently in the state of Nevada. So without further ado, let's bring Brandon Davis up on camera and welcome him to Pick Your Politics. And big round of applause for you, Brandon. You hear it?
Hey, Brandon. How are you?
Yeah.
I need one of those everywhere I go.
Yeah, there you go.
Great.
There you go. Thanks for taking time out. I know you're busy campaigning and stuff, but let me kick it off, Brandon, and ask you, what in your estimation is the most important role or most important responsibility that the governor of Nevada has?
Great question. I mean, there's a lot of things that, a governor does. I mean, I think at the most important part of it is, just being a leader, right? Making tough decisions, advocating for the people, not following governors in other states, not making decisions based off of what a handful of other people tell you. So, just being a leader, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Could you tell us the difference between, and tell the folks out here that are listening, the difference between an independent and a libertarian candidate?
Well, there's Libertarian Party candidates, right? So that's a big L. And that's somebody that's registered as a Libertarian voter who has been nominated at the Libertarian Party of Nevada's convention. And then there's, of course, small L libertarians, which I think are a majority of the people in this state, which is kind of more of a philosophy-based type of thing. So, it's basically, small government, fiscal responsibility / social liberalism, let people live their lives how they want to live. So that's kind of the small L philosophy. Now, as far as an independent is just a nonpartisan, candidate or voter, right? So they're not registered with the Republican, Democrat, Independent American Party, or the Libertarian Party, which are the only four parties recognized in the state at this time. So that's kind of the difference between an independent and a Libertarian candidate. The Libertarian Party candidate is actually with a political party.
I'm sorry. I was just to follow up on that. Have you always been a Libertarian, or were you a Republican?
That's what I was going to ask.
A Democrat, and then you switched?
Always been a Libertarian. So
Okay.
I first registered to vote in 2004. as a libertarian. I was living in a very conservative red state, Oklahoma, at the time. And in that presidential race, you weren't allowed to vote for a non-Republican or non-Democrat candidate. And I just thought that that was a bit silly, right? You know, that there was other candidates that were running for office at that time, and you weren't able to vote for them in that state. So kind of a rebellious gesture, I registered as a libertarian, and then eventually started to learn about, you know, kind of the principles behind the party and what they were doing, and I've been registered as a libertarian ever since.
How many libertarians, Brandon, do you think are in this state?
Well, there's, as of this time, I think upwards of 18,000 registered libertarian voters in this
Okay.
state. However, again, as I said before, I think that there's you know, way more. You know, I think there's obviously 37% of the registered voters in the state are registered as a non-Democrat or non-Republican.
Okay.
And I would, you know, I would love to see just a poll of those people, given the option of libertarian candidates or, you know, libertarianism in general, just to see where they land there. But I think the majority of people in the state, you know, Nevada's always been a very purple state in regards to, you know, the gambling aspect
Right,
and legalized, you know, sex work and, you know, decriminalizing marijuana and all these different things over the course of the history of the state that are very, very libertarian, right? And so, you know, most people in the state, again, you know, kind of fall in that area of being, you know, fiscally responsible, you know, limited government, you know, freedoms over everything, but also, you know, let people live how they want to live, you know, choose what they want to do with their bodies, you know, choose who they want to marry. I mean, we've seen that through legislation and even in our Constitution that, you know, that social liberalism is very apparent in the state. So, you know, kind of having both of those tenets, I think there's a lot of people in the state that have that mantra.
Do you think that they lean a little bit towards conservatism, but just not quite there?
Yeah, I would say definitely in some parts of the state. Obviously, your more rural communities, you know, there's definitely that aspect of you know, kind of being more on just like that limited government kind of side
Right.
and less on the you know, the socially liberal side
Right.
of things. Yeah, I mean, you know, we've seen, you know, opposition to gay marriage in the state. We've seen opposition to you know, the right to abortion. I mean, things of that sort. So yeah, obviously there's you know, a conservative base in the state.
So, running as a libertarian, you're going to pull from Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
Yeah.
So, and Dennis and I go to a lot of the Republican events, political events around town, and both of us were just as surprised to know of you and hear about you. And have you campaigned, or how long have you campaigned? When did you start? And have you been to some of these Republican events around town? And which ones do you go to campaign?
So we started our campaign earlier this year. You know, we got into candidate filing period and started firing off kind of our assets and our tools, building our infrastructure for our volunteer teams, you know, getting our online assets created, our branding, things of that sort that are all necessary to run a viable campaign. So that's kind of when we started. As far as, you know, attending events or, you know, getting the word out and speaking with communities across the state, absolutely. You know, we've done events in Story County, in Douglas County, Washoe County, as well as Clark County, and we're you know, working to hit every single county across the state at least twice prior to the November election. So, you know, this state is incredibly diverse and has many different, you know, backgrounds and peoples and communities, and so we want to be able to talk to them as much as possible. But you know, absolutely, Republicans, I think, you know, are a place that we find, you know, some alignments in, and I think that there's, especially with our opponent, you know, on the GOP side that we're running against, you know, who is obviously in favor of red flag laws, you know, who, you know, is shown to not be, you know, respectful for health freedoms, you know, and I could go on, but, you know, as far as Republicans, their best option, I feel like, is to vote for somebody like me that is going to, again, respect freedoms, uphold individual liberty, fight against crony politics, you know, protect Second Amendment rights at every, you know, aspect. So yeah, absolutely, we're out there talking to Republicans as much as possible, as well as Democrats.
Well, given what you say, what do you think you, Brandon, bring to the table in this election that your two opponents don't bring to the table? Sisolak obviously has tremendous name recognition. Crying out loud, he's governor of the state of Nevada. Joe Lombardo has been sheriff for 8 years in Clark County, running a huge department, dealing with a lot of very important law and order issues, plus the name recognition. So what do you bring to the table to beat those two guys down?
So, I mean, as far as bringing to the table and just unique capabilities, experience, things of that sort, I've got a lot of things in my background that qualify me, for the job for sure. Let's just start at the premise. I don't come from, affluent, backgrounds. I came from a very hardworking, low socioeconomic, blue collar, Northern Illinois, family, right? We were homeless at one point. I mean, I've been in, public housing. I've went through, welfare, all these different things. So I understand that aspect of what people are experiencing in this state, as obviously Nevada being one of the largest welfare states in the U.S. Yeah. Now, I went to public schools, where crime was rampant. We had metal detectors at our doors, law enforcement on premises, there was gang activity, at every turn. So I'm familiar with our public education system and how broken it is, right? So I'm a business owner, multiple businesses. So I've started businesses, I've bought businesses, I have employees, I've run payroll taxes, commerce taxes, sales and use taxes, all these different things that are involved with running a business. So right. I've got multiple different, facets in my life and my background that uniquely qualify me for somebody that could run a state. And so that's kind of the start of it. But as far as what I bring to the table beyond that, I would have to say that, just first and foremost, having a libertarian at the head of our state, I think creates, this checks and balances that has never been seen before, right? So you've got obviously Republicans and Democrats in the Assembly and the state Senate, right. and having somebody that has a differing perspective that's going to, again, uphold the individual rights, liberties, economic freedoms, is going to fight for business, right? Protect every right that Nevadans currently have and work hard to maintain more of them. So there's many different things that qualify me and make me a viable candidate and a reason that somebody should vote for me.
Speaking of business, so let's say you were governor during 2020, during the pandemic and all of this, would you have shut down businesses in Nevada and told them that they were non-essential?
Absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, Sisolak did it, and Lombardo has said that he would have done it, right?
Right. Yep.
He said a lot of things that I think are ridiculous, but absolutely not. I mean, taking the power out of the people's hands, not allowing them to make the choice, I think was awful and just unconscionable, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we saw even before the government came in and started to enforce their mandates and their lockdowns and do all the things that they did, that the market was already responding in a certain way even prior to that happening, right? So we saw businesses, whether it's, changing their hours or requiring mask wearing, all the different things that they were doing, the businesses were already doing that. And I would have allowed the businesses to make their own decisions and allow them to operate in a way that would have kept people safe and allowed them to continue to operate their business. And that goes for schools as well. I mean, I think we see the data now that it was a wrong move. We actually saw data at that time when things were happening in real time that showed us, the children weren't part of the equation much, right? So, the schools should have been open the whole time, and I would have made sure that they stayed open. Businesses should have been open the whole time. I would have allowed them to stay open. At the end of the day, what libertarianism is about is allowing individuals to make choices for themselves outside of government. And anytime that government comes in and enforces mandates, lockdowns, restrictions, it's harmful, period.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I think that's well said. In case you're just tuning in, Brandon Davis is our guest on Pick Your Politics. He is a libertarian candidate for governor of the state of Nevada. Where, Brandon, do you think Steve Sisolak has gone wrong or is going wrong, his biggest screw up so far as governor of Nevada?
Well, that's easy. I mean, it's expanding the state. It's expanding government, right? At the end of the day, we're in an affordable housing crisis right now that people are really, really feeling, right? So there's people that can't afford to rent their houses anymore. There's people that can't buy housing, and it's because of a lack of a supply, right? And why is there a lack of a supply? It's because of government bureaucracy and restrictions and barriers and zoning laws and permitting and all these different things that are government-imposed problems. So I think the biggest thing that he has done is not found ways to reduce government. And you can't expect a Democrat to do that. But to me, that's the biggest thing outside of obviously the 2.5 years through COVID. I mean, that's
Right.
I mean, it to me, and I hate to use this word, and I think it's people can say what they want, but there are certain aspects through the COVID a period that of things that he did that I would find criminal. Period. So that's the number one thing, and I think just again expanding government, expanding the welfare state, expanding government overreach in our lives and our business owners' lives. Through the last 3.5 years of his entire time as governor, I think those are the biggest items.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Yeah. I want to go to, there's a few things I want to ask you about from your website. I was on your website and you have all of the issues listed out and how you feel about certain things. You touched on gun laws just a second there. Can you tell the folks, if you were governor, would you make Nevada a constitutional carry state? And what do you feel about high capacity magazines and ARs and all of the things that people are concerned about nowadays?
So, I say this every time that somebody asks me about this, an armed society is a free society, period, right? So for me, yes, I am in full favor of a constitutional carry state for Nevada, would work to do that. That's very important to me. I would also remove any red flag laws, that are there, and work in every aspect to make sure that the Second Amendment is not infringed on, by the people in Nevada. I'm a big advocate for, again, the easiest way to keep us from tyranny is to make sure that our people are armed. So, shall not be infringed, period.
I agree. That's great. Another thing on your website was decriminalizing drugs. So can you tell me, and I wasn't sure just from reading what you had on your website, if you're just talking about marijuana, or are you talking about cocaine, heroin? Can you give us a little bit of, rein that in a little bit and be specific about how you feel about those things?
Sure. Yeah, that's one of those that kind of gets people talking a little bit. And I'll just say to the previous question. By the way, again, my opponents are awful when it comes to Second Amendment rights. We've seen obviously Sisolak pass his laws, but and allow those to come through the legislature. But we know that Joe Lombardo again is in favor of red flag laws. He's publicly said that he supported defunding the police, which I find hilarious for a Republican, but
yeah, it's amazing.
It is what it is. So, so I'm literally the only governor candidate that is 100% going to fight for the rights of every Nevadan when it comes to the Second Amendment. So just wanted to leave that there. As far as the decriminalizing drugs, we've seen some amazing data and information come out from Portugal, from even the state of Oregon, as far as decriminalizing those drugs. So we currently have people that taxpayers are paying for possession, of nonviolent crimes and possession of, some of these drugs. So, getting those people out of prison and back into the communities to create jobs, to get them back home with their families. We see a huge, issue with, children not growing up with their fathers. And I'm, as a father myself who grew up with a single mother, that's a big issue for me. And I think one of the easiest ways that we can make, our community stronger is by making sure that their dads and their fathers are involved in their lives, and their mothers, right? So we've got people in prison for these nonviolent crimes. We've seen since the beginning of the war on drugs, it be a complete failure, right? It hasn't decreased the amount of drugs coming into our country. It hasn't decreased the amount of drug use. So I think that there's more data and more facts and proof behind how it's been a failure and why it needs to go than there is for continuing it on.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just a huge problem. Stephanie and I have talked about this a lot because we both care a lot about kids and their education. And you said that the education system here is horrible, which I agree. And that is one of the multitudinous reasons why people are leaving Nevada. What would you do to get our education system better? back on track, incentivize better people to teach our kids?
There's two strategies there. So the first one is just more choice, right? So, when it comes to choice, our kids don't have a lot of choice. Our parents don't have a lot of choice. These kids are locked into a specific school based on their zip code, which is awful. It's terrible, right? So I think, when we add more options such as education savings accounts, vouchers programs, micro schools, different, more innovative approaches to education, I think we have to look at all of those, right? So I think expanding options outside of the public system is a win. We see in any thriving marketplace where there's low pricing, there's high supply, right? So right now we don't have a lot of supply. There's a lot of barriers that charter schools, micro schools, things like that have through occupational licensing that require ridiculous things to start these new schools. So I think when you see more options and more choice, you're going to see the whole system get better. Now, on the public side, I think breaking apart Clark County School District and Washoe County School District needs to happen, period. Right? So the situation that was created to create 17 different school districts in our state based off of one per county is so old and outdated that it no longer makes sense with the overwhelming growth that we've seen in the state. So right now we've got this small group of people controlling the 5th largest school board in the entire country. It doesn't make any sense, right? And we've seen corruption. We've seen, a lack of accountability. I mean, I could go on, but I believe that the fastest way to fix the public system is, allowing it to be broken down into smaller districts. I think that there's 40 to 50 different school districts just in the city of Denver alone. I mean, don't quote me on that exact number. I could be wrong, but that's just an example to show you how ridiculous it is that our state only has 17 school districts. So I think, again, that's the way that we solve some of the issues in the public side. Once you break down the school districts into smaller districts, it allows for more accountability, allows for some of that funding to be able to work in different ways to maybe shore up smaller classroom sizes. Now, my kids, in their schools that they go to, they have smaller classes. And it's not that the teachers are these amazing, gurus. It's because there's a community, right? The teachers communicate with the parents. The kids don't feel overwhelmed. They get enough time with their teachers. So that's kind of the pathway to that, I think, on the public side.
There's one more thing I wanted to ask you from your website. You talked about qualified immunity, and we all know that law enforcement, judges, they have immunity from prosecution. And but there's always an element of corruption in both. There's always there's a bad apple everywhere, right?
Right.
So you talked about this. Can you kind of expand and tell the people what your thoughts are as far as getting rid of qualified immunity so that they will be held accountable for decisions they make that are maybe against somebody's constitutional rights, or they need to be held accountable and responsible for the things that they do?
Absolutely. Yeah, and let me just preface this, because I have this conversation, especially with conservatives that are very passionate about the law enforcement community. For me, this is not one of these things. My opponent, Lombardo, who has verbally said with his own mouth that he is in favor of defunding the police. That's not my objective here, right? For me, it's more about accountability and stripping away some of the systemic things in our judicial and justice system that allows bad actors to get away with things that they otherwise should not have. So, the qualified immunity side is not just for, police officers, but just for public, employees, period. And I think when we see, in our state where, over 40% of the Supreme Court cases, in our state have to do with prison inmates, right? So there's obviously an issue there where these prison inmates are, feeling that their civil rights are being abused, and it's going into courts. So, there's a lot of different ways that, I think that, again, these bad actors, and not all people in law enforcement, not all people in the public sector, public employees, are bad people,
right.
But some do make some bad decisions. And I think that there's some things in our system that allow them to get away with that. If there's not a court precedent, from years prior, to be able to go into, civil litigation. So I think by stripping away some of those things, stripping away, no-knock warrants, stripping away civil asset forfeiture is another great one. In addition to, ending qualified immunity, these police departments and highway patrols, law enforcement, they literally fund some of their budgets on a yearly basis based off of taking money from people, which is it's abhorrent. It doesn't make any sense. So, and a lot of these things are like $1,000 or less. They're not big cases. I know that there was the big one that the Institute for Justice and Nevada Policy Research and some of the people in the state, the ACLU, got behind when this man was driving down. I think he was going to Pahrump, and he got like $60,000 taken from him, and eventually got it back after a year of litigation. But just the fact that you can do that shows how unfree our state really is, under the covers. So those are some, again, just some justice issues that I'm passionate about that I think our state could be much better at.
Yeah.
Well, and some of these judges, there's, you see this across the country, that there's political prosecution because judges make decisions sometimes based on their political views. And if the defendant is of a different political background or view, they judge based on that. And I don't think that, I think that they should be held accountable for those decisions.
There's
and that
no
should
doubt about it. It should be an unbiased, objective ruling or whatever. Brandon, what role would you have your lieutenant governor play?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's several different things that the lieutenant governor does. Tourism is a big one, and obviously, this is a big tourism state. And I believe that we need to, look at ways to innovate outside of, outside of kind of the gaming and mining and some of the different things that we pigeonholed our stuff at. So I would be looking, to a lieutenant governor to find some innovative ways to expand out our portfolio of industries, right? To look at ways that we can bring in additional, industries and businesses into our state. To make sure that we have a more well-rounded portfolio.
Right.
There's a ton of really interesting things. I just learned about there's going to be the largest salmon farm in the world that's going to be built in, or they're currently building it right now, or about to break ground. They haven't broke ground, but it's going to be in Pershing County. And it's literally going to provide all the salmon for the entire western half of the United States.
Wow.
It's incredible. So I mean,
Wow.
Nevada is really poised with some of the land and some of the incentives that we have to really bring in really innovative type of industries. We just have to get the ball rolling, and we have to do it. And it's got to be not giving money out to our buddies like Sisolak has over the last 3.5 years, and showing up to press conferences, raving about the things that he's done, when at the end of the day, we're still a state that is 100%, well, not 100%, but clearly a majority dependent on gaming, tourism, and mining.
Yeah.
Before we close out the show, I wanted to ask you about water. That's, an all-important subject.
Oh, yeah.
What you would do as far as water. And then also after that, any topic we didn't cover that you want to cover, go ahead and let us know that too.
Sure. Yeah, water is a big topic right now for sure. I actually sat in with the Southern Nevada Water Authority recently and heard a wonderful conversation on kind of some of the things that we have been doing, right, even as far back as since 2002 and what the plans are moving forward. I think that there's some interesting things there in regards to one thing that I learned is that, we're 90% self-sufficient, right? So 90% of the water that comes out of Lake Mead goes back into Lake Mead. And I thought that was really interesting. The majority of the residential side of things doesn't really seem to be the issue. The issue seems to be on kind of evaporation cooling on large scale warehouses, and some of the other things. So they're working to try to get some of that 10%. But it's definitely something that we've got to do. I know, and when I talk to people, they say, well, can't we just go, to the federal government and say, we need more of a percentage? Well, that's not that easy when you've got 7 states that are reliant on, the Colorado River Basin and an international country. And then in each one of those states, they've got, different pieces that come off of the river and rights to those to that water. So it's a huge thing that's gonna take a decade or so to really kind of chip away at restructuring the percentages of what each state gets. However, I would definitely be a leader and a fighter in knocking on that door consistently saying Nevadans deserve more of that percentage, period.
Yeah, and I'm hearing,
I can tell you.
I'm talking to people from the water district, Brandon, and they're saying they're kicking around the idea of limiting the size of the pool now that you could have in your backyard. Come on.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the things that they're doing, is that, obviously not for houses that are currently built, but moving forward, that,
Right.
yeah, they're going to start limiting that. And it's so interesting because, the biggest, the biggest ways that we use the most amount is through ag, right? So agriculture, right? And I think finding ways to get them to come to the table and say, hey, we need you guys to really step up to the plate here on the amount of water you're using. That's going to be a big thing that we have to look at. We're going to have to also look at some alternative methods. I know that they're talking with the Southern California Water Authority on ways that we can work together to get more of a percentage from the Colorado River Basin. So there's lots to do there, but I'm going to be a fighter for the state of Nevada in every aspect and making sure that it's sustainable and that we're going to be good moving forward.
Stephanie and I both want to know what your agenda is going forward as far as having events, as far as getting out in the public and letting people know, hey, I'm here, I'm running for governor.
Well, the biggest thing here, and I talk about this a lot because part of our campaign is, the talking about ending the duopoly system. So right now, most voters, right, and most people in the state, to them, it's a Republican or a Democrat, and just like you guys and probably some of your viewers on this show are like, I didn't even know that there was a third option, right?
Right.
And so us
Right.
being able to get out and talk about that system
Right.
and all the systemic ways that the media, the large-scale organization, PACs, colleges, all the different people that run the polling. So if you've ever gotten a political poll that says, if you voted today, would it be for this person or that person?
Yeah.
There's no third option. So we're not even being included in some of those polls that are coming out. It's either Sisolak or Lombardo. So that's a big issue. So for us, our campaign, what we're doing is we're going out to all the media companies, we're going out to the organizations we know that run polling, and we're having those conversations saying, include us in those polls. There was one that just came out recently from Emerson College that, again, didn't include us in the poll. However, 16% of the 2,000 people, that were in that poll said that they didn't want to vote for either one of the two options, right? So that's 16% of Nevada possibly that would say neither, right? Give me somebody else. So for us, we've got to do as many events as possible across the state. I've already talked about we're going to every single county before November. We're holding events. I've got one in Douglas County up in northern Nevada on June 30th, or I'm sorry, July 30th. So we're excited for that. We're booking more. We're working on one for Elko County and Humboldt and Pershing and Eureka and all the different counties in this state. We're going to be doing some stuff in southern Nevada in August and September as well.
Good.
We're going to be working our butts off and trying to get the word out as much as possible. We've got some funding for some advertising as well. So
Good.
We're going after it pretty hard.
Good. All right. Anything else for our guests before we let them go?
One more thing that I didn't think about till just now before we let you go. With Roe v. Wade being in the news so much, pro-life or pro-choice for all the folks out there?
Yeah, I'm always going to be for pro-choice. I think the government has no business being in our personal lives. I mean, what an individual chooses is their own thing. But for me, Roe v. Wade was horribly written. It had to go, and with it gone, it takes a little bit of that power from the federal government, which as a libertarian, I love that. I think, decentralizing down to states as much as possible, decentralizing down to counties and cities and really getting into the nitty gritty there, I think is incredibly good. So, I know that is a touchy subject for folks, but I always am going to just, want to allow the individual to make the choice. I think without choice, we don't have freedom, right? You have to have, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Yeah, and I agree. One last question.
Sure.
If you become governor of this state, are you going to cut your hair?
Absolutely not. And it's funny, we go to some different events and people are like, hey, you kind of look different than some of the other guys. And I'm like, well, that's the point, right?
Yeah.
That's the point is, I think, having, these old guys, in their 70s, I mean, let's talk about how we should have, people that are younger, that are more in tune and in touch. So, if, appearances be what it is, but, we're a lot more connected in our communities than those old guys.
Well, like the old saying, you can't tell a book by its cover. Anyway,
That's right.
Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. Please let
Thank you,
Stephanie
guys.
and me know about your events coming up, especially here in Southern Nevada. If we can help you out, keep us in the loop, will you?
I absolutely will. Thank you for taking the time to have me on. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank
Thanks
you
for
for
coming
coming
on.
on. Thanks very much. All right, Brandon Davis, everybody. Now people know
Yeah.
there's a third candidate.
Yeah, we touched on a lot of
Yeah.
subjects and issues, and he's got some great ideas and opinions, and I think he would resonate with a bunch of the voters.
Yeah, I do
in
too.
the
He's got a
state.
lot of enthusiasm, and, and I like that too.
Right.
Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for another edition of Pick Your Politics. I'm Dennis. This is Stephanie. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you tune in. We're going to be back same place, same time next week. So remember, get out and vote when you can, folks. So long.
See you later.